is Not Sam Wrestling.
Introducing your host from New York, here is Sam Roberts.
I'd like to welcome to Not Sam Wrestling somebody who has done more for independent wrestling in the last several years than just about anybody. There's a small handful of people, I think, that have turned independent wrestling into what we know it to be, kind of this entrepreneurial place that goes beyond the ring and a place where wrestlers can actually survive and prosper without being under anyone's thumb, without being under any contract, and it's redefined the business. He's got a new documentary that is it's on the festival circuit right now. It's called This Is Wrestling. This man is Joey Ryan. Joey, what's the haps, man?
Hey, man. It's good to hear from you. It's been a while, but thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. First of all, I saw the documentary, and it's really, really great. I always wonder, because there have been lots of, every person who considers themselves an independent filmmaker has done some kind of weird documentary about every person who considers themselves an independent wrestler, and some are better than others, and it's all, it's all in the storytelling and in the production value. And I was really, really impressed watching this, not only because immediately you can see that the production value is sky high, and this is a super professionally done piece of work, but the story, I think that a lot of wrestling fans are familiar with your story over the last few years, but to have this time in your life kind of put into a capsule like this, I think is going to be valuable as a historical document for independent wrestling, as well as just for yourself to have this. How did the documentary come about?
So James Agista, one of the directors, approached me about probably, because I think they filmed me for almost 2 years. So it had been a couple, obviously a little bit before they started filming. So anyways, he is a big wrestling fan, and he had just learned about independent wrestling. He didn't know it even existed.
Wow.
And he was fascinated by it, and he kept researching it, and he kept coming back to what he told me was me as the most interesting or different person inside independent wrestling. So he approached me. He actually invited me out to lunch, and I went and had a lunch with him because he sent me his credentials. He works on Bar Rescue.
Yeah.
And so I went and had a meeting with him, and he just kind of pitched it to me. He said, "Hey, we'd like to follow you around, and document you, and you won't know we're there. We'll shadow you. We'll cover our own travel. You won't have to pay us. We just want to get this. We're just big fans, and we want to do this." So it sounded easy, non-intrusive. So I agreed to it, and then they started following me around and got actually a pretty good time, because they got the stuff with Cody in the cage in the Cow Palace, and stuff with Mick Foley in Ireland and Candice's farewell match. So it was a good time for them to follow me around.
Was it at all difficult with any of the independent promoters explaining that you had a film crew that was going to be with you now?
It was no, I wouldn't say it was difficult, because I think I've gotten to a status now where people trust me, or people so I think, I don't think it wasn't too difficult. The only place we had a roadblock was filming stuff in Japan with DDT, because the culture there, the wrestling culture there, because our documentary obviously goes behind the scenes, and the DDT was reluctant because it was going to break kayfabe.
Right.
So their culture of Japanese wrestling, they aren't where we are in America, where it's kind of an open book. So that was the only the only holdup we had. But other than that, everyone was super cool.
Have you watched? Do you watch it? Are you the type that will go back and be able to watch it and enjoy it?
I've seen it obviously a couple times, because throughout the editing process to what the final version became. And you know what? It's to me it's boring, because it's my story, and I lived it. But it's the fact that it's engaging an audience, and people seem to really like it, and it's getting great reviews. In that first festival we put it out, we won the best picture, so on the first festival. So it's kind of cool. It's kind of surreal that people are connecting to it, because again, it's just my story.
Is it kind of amazing to you? Because I would imagine the world that you're in, you work so much, you travel so much, you're at so many shows, that everywhere you go, people are kind of aware of who you are. People are aware of what you're doing. The fact that there is still this massive audience that kind of knows WWE and wrestling that's on TV, but is so unaware, as big as independent wrestling is, that there's still this giant group of people that are completely unaware of what it is.
Well, I mean, you got to think about how many people there are in general, and not only in America but in the world. So, it's definitely like independent wrestling is still definitely an underground scene. Although it's pushing those limits, and I think I think the independent wrestling boom has a lot to do with WWE finally acknowledging that independence existed by when they debuted Kevin Owens, and and they're like, oh, he's been grinding for 15 years, and then their casual fans are like, wait a minute, like we just heard of this guy today, and they go Google it, and because of Google and the internet, they go Google him, and all his Ring of Honor stuff comes up, all his Pro Wrestling Guerrilla stuff comes up, and then they go down that wormhole, and then they realize there is independent wrestling, and then they become fans, and then obviously with AEW kind of growing out of independent wrestling and now having mainstream attention, that brings focus on independent wrestling as well. So I think it is still underground, but I think it's starting to burst through in certain areas, and we're seeing it now with how independent wrestling is growing.
How do you feel about people getting to know you a little bit more as a person? You kind of present this character that everybody's gotten used to, super over the top, super outrageous. When in reality, I think, you come across to me as a pretty kind of shy, soft-spoken, intelligent, quiet guy. How do you feel about people getting to know that guy and not just the Joey Ryan, baby oil, lollipop, mustache guy?
It's cool. I mean, you're right. It is a persona I present, and I am pretty shy and introverted, which I always feel is like the most disappointing thing. I feel like I'm the most disappointing person for fans to meet, because they expect this wild and crazy guy, and I'm just like, hey, what's up, man? So, but yeah, no, it's cool that people get, because there's a lot of people that make assumptions about me because of the character, and so it's kind of cool that people can get to know a different side of me, or the real me. The person behind the performer. So that's pretty cool. Because obviously the character is very polarizing, and I get a lot of hate for it. But for people to see behind the scenes is definitely cool.
Do you feel like you still get hate for it? I feel like there was that thing, when the dick suplexes first kind of started, and you got that new wind in your career, and everybody became obsessed with this move, and you ran it for all it was worth, and kind of continue to run it for all it's worth to this day. I feel like in the beginning, when it first happened, there was a lot of the backlash, and a lot of the people who didn't like that it exposed the business or made a joke out of everything or this or that. I guess I feel like now, because you've been so inarguably successful and you've completely grown and grown and grown this fan base, I guess I don't, and you would probably hear it more than I do, but I don't hear the voice of that critic nearly as loudly as I did in the beginning.
It's definitely toned down a bit, and it helps that Mick Foley did the dick spot with me, and Billy Gunn and X-Pac and Johnny Gargano and D'Lo Brown just did it, and Nunzio, and all these major names in wrestling now are 3 Hall of Famers, and some. So I feel like with if there was like fan resistance to it, to see that it's accepted by the wrestling world and the wrestling community, helps soften that blow. But there's still backlash, which is normal. I mean, I think wrestling is very subjective, as is any art form. So
yeah,
people can like what they like and hate what they hate. And, movies, TV shows, they all go through the same thing. So, and people get passionate about their entertainment, which is cool, and weird a little bit, but yeah, people get very passionate about it. But, so, they, when they hate, they really hate, or when they love, they really love. So there's a little bit still there, but you're right. It has kind of toned down a bit.
Do you have any trouble pitching this thing, even to kind of the legends, when you do it to them, to the D'Lo Browns or the Nunzios or anything? Is everybody kind of aware of it, or do you still come across people where you have to explain, no, I do this thing, and I know it sounds weird, but it's, super, super popular, and you got to trust me on this?
Yeah, most people are aware of it. I mean, most wrestlers know what's going on within the industry, even on the independent level. So most people are aware of it. It's always fun to bring up to somebody who I'm not sure is fully like when I had to pitch it to Billy Gunn, or when I had to tell Billy Gunn about it, I wasn't sure how, because he's obviously a large, intimidating man. So, but he was really cool about it, and he gets the performance side of it, and obviously he did some DX stuff is pretty goofy, but so he was cool with it. But yeah, it's always kind of fun, and it's even more mind blowing because when, like, as you see in the documentary, no spoiler, I'm hoping it's not a spoiler anyways, that Mick Foley actually knew of it and pitched the idea to me of him doing it.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like, my mind was blown at that point, because Mick Foley was not only aware of what I did, but also wanted to be a part of it.
So the premise of the doc, which I think is great, to me the central story is this kind of universal theme where something happened in your professional life that you thought was the worst thing that could possibly happen, and you thought it was going to end, and that was the WWE turning you down. It was Bill DeMott at the WWE saying, we don't want him, and that was the one vote that kept you out of WWE. This was after you'd been released from TNA. These are the two big dogs in town, and you think that this decision being made is going to be the end of your wrestling career. So you go to a PWG show, you have a match with Drake Younger, and all of a sudden, this new freedom is born in you because you're no longer worried about anything. You're not trying to figure out what's happening a couple of years down the road. You're not trying to figure out, well, what's TNA going to think of this? What's WWE going to think of this? For the first time in your career, you are performing for Joey Ryan, and you're doing the stuff that you think is good, and that's the only reason to do or not do it. And it's the greatest thing that ever happens to your career, and it fulfills you creatively, and it makes you this amazing performer, and it draws you the biggest audience that you've ever had. When you start building a buzz, and this thing starts to become really successful, does that ever creep back into your head, that feeling of, wait, I'm getting really big and really pretty famous doing all this stuff? There is still that little kid in me that grew up watching WWE. Oh boy, have I screwed up my chances as I've gained them back?
I mean, that's always a possibility. It's weird because we want to have goals, we want to have aspirations, and obviously most wrestlers, when they get into it, want to be in WrestleMania, or they want to be on the WWE roster, or whatever it is, and that's the goal. And when that goal gets taken away or ended, then then you don't know really like what do you do, why are you still doing this? But as you mentioned, the finding a new way to look at wrestling, where I'm more creatively open and free, it might make it more difficult for me to transition over to a major company, but I don't know. I feel like I'm in an okay spot, because it's kind of weird, almost in every profession or occupation, the goal for everyone is to be their own boss and to set their own schedule and to be successful on their own terms. In wrestling, it's kind of weird because you don't really consider it a success unless you sign that away to somebody else. So there's like a little bit of pressure too for wrestlers to be like, I need to get a contract with somebody, because that's how you measure success in wrestling. But the more, the older I get, and the more, I look at what I've done and the business I've created for myself, I realize that I am my own boss, and I'm making it work. And, I got to take that as success, and take that and not get too caught up in landing a contract anywhere.
Who taught you the entrepreneurial side of all this? Because it's not like you just decided, okay, I'm going to be an independent wrestler and I'm going to make my money by doing wrestling shows. Like, you really shaped this into a much bigger business, in terms of branding yourself, in terms of finding new and original things to do and new and original ways to merchandise yourself. I mean, and you're doing it today. I saw it at Starcast. You were doing the Dick Touch photo op. You know, like you've always got some new, fresh way to make money doing this. Was there anybody that taught you that part of all of this?
I guess it was just through experience and I guess environment a little bit. You know, like pro wrestling tees becoming a thing really, really, really changed the game for independent wrestlers as far as merchandising goes. And, you know, and those guys are super helpful when, you know, when there's ideas to promote or pitch or capitalize. You know, they have a good system there. You know, just being good friends with the Young Bucks and seeing what they did. And, you know, they had to learn on the go too, because their popularity, you know, and that wasn't overnight. Obviously they've been working at it a long time, but like it really grew with when they became essentially YouTube stars on Being the Elite.
Yeah.
So, you know, just watching how they do it or asking them for advice as I go, hey, I know you guys are doing this, but at a larger level. You know, do you guys, you know, how did you guys handle this? So just, you know, I guess just reaching out to friends when I need it, not, you know, sitting down and taking a course on entrepreneurship, but just kind of, you know, trying to reach out to my friends who have been there, have gone through the similar stuff and getting their advice helped along the way.
Yeah, and I guess part of it is kind of the new school of mentality. I feel like the old school, whether it's in wrestling or any other business, I feel like the old school mentality is far less cooperative than it is now, meaning you wouldn't necessarily be friends with the people that are more successful than you or as successful, or you know what I mean? Like when you're looking at the Young Bucks, they're doing what you're doing on a bigger level. There probably was a time that you would look at them with kind of competition and jealousy and not go to them for advice, but on your own try to figure out how to beat them and probably not be able to do it. I think that we're in a different time though now where wrestlers and people outside of wrestling and bigger business seem like they work together a lot more and kind of have this understanding that as one grows, all can grow, and it just gets bigger and better for everybody.
I think that's exactly it. You know, I think especially, you know, like it might be one thing if you're in WWE and you know, you're on the cusp of the top spot and there's guys that are at the top spot that you feel like you could take over, you know, like there might be a little bit more competition there because it's such a narrow space there. You know, there's only so many top spots that exist. Independent wrestling is different because, you know, as you mentioned, as it grows, everybody does better. So I think there's a little bit more. I'm not saying there's not a brotherhood in WWE or in any major wrestling company, but I feel like the brotherhood in independent wrestling is let's treat independent wrestling first and then let it trickle down to us. But let us raise the bar for the industry. And so I think that's exactly what the point you're making. You know, it's more like we want everyone to be successful because then it makes us more successful.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you feel when your friends in your world that were kind of growing right alongside with you started to disappear and started to get gobbled up and signed? And I mean, that's from Drake Younger, who you said was kind of the catalyst for all this to happen. He ends up going to WWE, becoming a referee. You know, we talked about Kevin Owens a minute ago. But even Candice, I mean, I would imagine that Candice Lerae going over to NXT was probably the biggest kind of shock to your system, where you're like, hey, you know, we've got a good thing going here. We've figured out this industry for ourselves. And slowly but surely, all your friends end up still going over to whether it's WWE or AEW or whatever company, Impact, you know, Ring of Honor. And Candice is kind of, I would imagine, the biggest brick in that foundation.
Yeah, Candice's departure had the biggest effect on me, what I do, because obviously, you know, half of my bookings were teaming with her somewhere. But you know what, and it's kind of weird because you would think that, you know, all these guys going to NXT or signing exclusive deals, even with AEW, like you mentioned, would hurt independent wrestling. But I find that, you know, if let's say if Adam Cole doesn't sign with NXT, then maybe there's no spot for, you know, Flip Gordon to shine in, you know, and so in Ring of Honor. So I feel like in independent wrestling, there's always people waiting in the wings, talented people waiting in the wings, to take those spots when somebody leaves, that those spots might not have been open for, before they left. And, there's now, I think it's helped those guys, even though they're, my friends and I miss them and I wish I saw them more often, those guys departing give me more work, because now I'm more, since I'm kind of a bigger name in independent wrestling and there's less of us around, more people want a piece of me. So it's actually helped my business that they've gone on to these different places. So like I said, I feel like there's always another guy to come up and take the spot, and just needs that opportunity.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Do you worry at all that the long term, the general health of independent wrestling will start to not be as good because there's all these spots for people to go to? Like you said, as one gets better, the industry gets better, but as one disappears, does that work in reverse? And do you then have to take it upon yourself to try to make sure that the state of the industry of independent wrestling as a whole stays healthy, not just for you, but for everybody?
Yeah, I do have pride in I guess how I've helped independent wrestling, or, even with just booking my own shows, bar wrestling out in LA, just having that place for people to work, just to keep the growing and keep the industry healthy, or the independent wrestling side of it healthy. But I'm finding that it's not just like these people that have been wrestling forever finally getting noticed. I feel like the wrestler is getting younger and younger, and that's like, I guess, every sport. Baseball's getting younger and younger, football's getting younger and younger. These guys are ready to go and learn quick. And you've got guys like MJF, who is early 20s, and I know he's with AEW now, but
yeah,
these guys that are that are wrestling, they understand it, what I didn't understand until maybe I was 30. They're getting it sooner and earlier, and they're working with a more variety of people. So I feel like there's always, even if it's not within the industry already, there's people that are training at wrestling school now that haven't even debuted, that are going to make a big splash because of the all the available openings in independent wrestling.
And I guess you forget too, as wild as it is, because you just kind of live this life and do what it is that you do, but you have to know that the kids that are in wrestling school right now trying to figure out what they're going to do when they get out, they've been watching you. Like, they've seen your journey, and that's why they're quicker. They don't have to figure out this as they go like you did, like the Bucks did. They can look at you. They can look at the people like you and say, oh, they can look at Colt Cabana and say, like, this is how people brand themselves. This is how people make money beyond just wrestling on the independents.
Yeah, it might sound cliche, but I've been wrestling for 19 years now, so I've ran into a couple people that are in wrestling school or even wrestling, and they're like, "Oh, I've been watching you since I was a kid," and I'm like, "All right,"
yeah.
So it is cool, but yeah, if we can set an example, and obviously, you just brought up Colt Cabana, who's a great example of this. If we can set an example for people to realize that they can do this on their own, and not necessarily like shun, the mainstream wrestling or the contracted work, but maybe having the confidence that you can do it on your own will help elevate you into positions in their company, or if you do sign, or even get you in a better position to sign, if you're confident in your ability and your I guess in your ways to make money or to be self-sufficient, then it'll benefit your career as a whole.
Well, I think it surprised a lot of people when you didn't show up for AEW and Double or Nothing and everything around that, and that's because only a year ago you were right in there in the pocket with Cody and the Bucks and with and obviously with Hangman Page and being the Elite, and you had the huge spot at All In, and it kind of seemed like you were running with this crew. To see you not there in AEW, especially now that you're not under contract with Lucha Underground anymore, is kind of a surprise, I think, to a lot of people. Why are you not there?
It's funny because people still think I'm there or expect me to be there.
Right. Like, they just associate you with that brand because of everything you did a year ago.
I get tagged in all those like AEW tweets and all that stuff because people assume that I'm with that company. And those guys are my friends, my best friends, like and that doesn't change. But I've had extensive discussions with them, and it's just, it's a thing where they're not sure if what I do can play in, whether it's their television show or if it's so they don't really have an idea for me specifically. There's not really like, if we bring you on, we have to take away what makes you over. So it's a gamble for me, not only creatively, but financially, because even now, I'm making better money than these contracts can offer, to start. So not only would I essentially take a pay cut, but also essentially start over. And so, we've had discussions about it, and it just didn't make sense. It just felt like I would be irresponsible to myself and where I'm at and my life and my finances and, everything else, even my geography or my, creativity. It would be a gamble that don't really necessarily need to take.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting, because that's the first time, I think people associate AEW kind of with the Wild West atmosphere that being the elite created. And I don't think anybody's taken into account the fact that, they're going to be on TNT. Like, this is a theoretically a global brand that is going to have to appeal to the mainstream, and that the same way, it'd be tough to do dick spots in WWE, it'd be equally tough to do those in AEW, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's it's just finding out what can play and what can't play. And, they're obviously a new company, and they're still figuring it out as they go. As I came to decisions with them, it was like, we realized, okay, they're going to be successful without me. I'm going to be successful without them. Maybe our paths will cross at some point, but there's no urgency to it, because neither of us necessarily need the other one right now. It'd be nice to work with my friends, but it's, like I said, it's not a necessity right now, and until they figure out and learn, their own product and how they want to present it.
And look, having a Joey Ryan level star still existing on the independents keeps that industry healthy, like we were just talking about, and allows people to grow. And maybe, I mean, it's not the worst thing for AEW to have you on the independents, allowing this talent pool to still be able to cultivate and theoretically feed them, right?
I mean, yeah, like it's weird still to me because like a lot of promoters say, oh, when I announced you, our tickets spiked up, or we sold twice as many tickets, and independent wrestling being a different level everywhere, and in each company having their own different standards of draws. Like sometimes I wrestle, I go wrestle, and there's maybe it's in front of 100 people in a small town in the Midwest or something, but then that promoter will be like, we usually only draw 50, but with you we have 100 now, and then that's 50. Now I've doubled that attendance, and now those other wrestlers on the show who normally wrestle in front of the 50 people are now wrestling in front of twice as many people, and possibly gaining new fans and maybe new shirt sales, and maybe so my hope is that if I am spiking the attendance at some of these independent wrestling shows, that it's putting the other wrestlers on the show in front of new fans that they can, and now they can grow their brand.
Yeah. There were rumors also that were floating around along the same time of the, will he or won't he AEW stuff. The other thing that was floating in the ether was that you were considering a deal with NXT that would have you perform there for a while and then eventually transition into a coach with the WWE and the Performance Center and all that. Is that you eventually, a week or two ago, you went to your promotion, Bar Wrestling, and made the big announcement that you were going to remain independent, and that this is your home. This is where you feel like you belong. Is that something that's on your mind? Like, does the idea of finding a spot where you can wrestle for another year or two, make good, consistent money, and then kind of go off and go into the next phase of staying in the wrestling business, but not necessarily being a performer anymore? Is that something that you have on your mind, or are you not thinking on that level?
I try not to overthink on that level. It would always be nice to have a, like, I guess, job security, or, a place where that you can still, provide. after your time in the ring is done. And that's, that does weigh, because I'm getting, I'm 39 now. So that is a thing I think about. But I feel like I don't want to get caught up into something that, like I mentioned earlier, like I don't really have an urgency to get to. Like, I have to stop and realize that there's plenty of jobs in wrestling, whether it's just promoting my own shows or, being an agent somewhere, or, even finding a job in creative, maybe because, my experiences, or, just even, I guess, starting your own wrestling school and coaching your own wrestling school, like there's a lot of different avenues that you can go to. And I don't want to be quick to jump on anything because I'm worried, I don't want to get like scared into something, that might not be the best fit for me. So, it does weigh a little bit, I can't lie about that, but, I have to like pace myself and realize that, I don't need that necessarily.
Yeah. Do you, especially, because theoretically the jobs will continue to exist, right? People will always need trainers, whether it's for NXT or whether it's for something else. Should you not be able to perform in the ring anymore, you still have this wealth of information that has a value, right?
Yeah, for sure. And, some people have pointed out to me that, like ESPN played the original dick flip clip again last week. And it was, it's been, 4 years now, almost 4 years since it happened. So, that clip is essentially going to live forever. Like that's
your legacy.
That is my legacy. But what that does is that also lends itself to convention appearances and autograph signings, and so there's always those avenues to go down too. So there's a lot of different ways, and that like you're right, they're not going away. There's a lot of different avenues to make money, even outside the ring.
I almost don't want to ask because I don't love the tricks being revealed all the time. So if this is your one kayfabe protection that you want to keep, feel free to keep it. But how do you pull off the dick touch photos without the actual dick touch happening?
Well, fans all the time are asking it. Merchandise tables at every show I'm at. Hey, can I take a picture touching your dick? And obviously it's over my wrestling gear. So at WrestleCon, High Spots saw all these photos going around. They said, you should be charging for this. Let's do this photo op. So we did the photo op during WrestleCon weekend, and it was pretty successful. So I think it's gonna pop up, no pun intended, every so often these photo ops, and it's just kind of my penis is very professional, and it stays professional.
Good.
It's these, people's, I guess it's the supply and demand of it. I mean, if there's a demand for these photos, then, sure, I'll do them. It's kind of fun, and it's different, and it sets me apart from everyone else.
I feel like it's the ring gear version. So like when Sting does a meet and greet, sometimes it's a Sting meet and greet, but then if you pay a little extra, he'll put the makeup on and you can take a picture with Sting in the makeup. You can go to a Joey Ryan meet and greet, but if it's a special occasion, you can get a photo op and you can do the dick touch. I feel like that's your Sting paint. I
mean, you're right. It is. It's something that is exclusive to me, or at least, I mean, I guess I'm the only one in wrestling that has a demand for it. So, so it's something that I can make my own and market myself, which is good to have in wrestling because, anything that can set you apart or stand out is better for you.
Yeah. Do you do you see yourself doing anything with PWG in the future at all, or is that kind of done?
I mean, never say never. I just, at a point where, my style didn't really lend itself well to that style, and also, not really having a creative influence over it, even though, I was one of the founders, that kind of led me to just starting my own thing where I could, do the bar wrestling thing. And, obviously it's a smaller scale than PWG, but it worked for me. And, I found an audience and, and I can sell out a bar on a Wednesday night, which is kind of cool because it doesn't take away from my weekend work, which is where I obviously travel the most. So I'm pretty content with what I'm doing in Southern California right now, but never say never with PWG. I mean, you really can't, especially right now in wrestling, you really don't know.
Right. Totally. Makes sense. Do you like the promoting part of this? Do you like being a promoter?
There are things that are stressful about it.
Yeah.
The thing that I don't like the most is that, obviously there's a lot of wrestling out there and a lot of great wrestlers that want to work and they want to come out to LA and they want to do a show, but my shows are standing room only and in a tight space. So I can't have that audience there for 4 hours, so I try to keep it to a tight 6-match card and, 2.5 hours long. We don't even start till 9 PM because it's a weeknight, and I definitely don't want anyone there past midnight because it's a weeknight. So yeah. I can't really just keep adding on matches. So it's the most difficult part is to tell somebody that like, hey, I just don't have a spot for you without it coming off as, hey, I don't think you're good enough, which is not the case, So that's the most stressful part is having to tell people that there's just not a spot for them. But it's pretty rewarding when fans come up to you or other wrestlers and they're just happy with your show or what you've presented. Yeah,
totally. Is there any way that fans, because I know that the documentary is on the convention circuit right now, is there anything fans can do to help spread the word or get it to a place in terms of finding a distributor that you want it to get to? Because I know that there's a lot of people pretty anxious to get their eyes on this thing.
Yeah, I guess word of mouth is the way to go right now. We're, because of the buzz it's getting and the hype it's getting and the great reviews it's been getting on the film festival circuit and convention circuit. We're hoping that we can ride that buzz into a good distribution deal, and I don't know if that's some sort of a digital release or a streaming service, but the more hype it gets, the better chance we have of getting a deal with somebody that can provide this for everybody.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's a great story and it's a tremendous time capsule of everything that was going on there. Are you thinking now, like, okay, now that you've established that your future is in independent wrestling, the dust is kind of settled on everything, as much as the dust is going to settle, it's still wrestling and everything is topsy-turvy and can change on a dime. But for the most part, you're out of the Lucha Underground contract. We're not doing AEW. We're not doing WWE. We're staying independent. Have you kind of wrapped your head around what this next incarnation of Joey Ryan is going to be and going to feel like, and how you're going to keep momentum rolling the way it is?
You know what? I don't really know. Like it's one of those things where, I just have to, I guess, roll with the punches. It's not to sound cliche, but things have been going well for me without trying to set certain, like, well, by this time I wanted to be doing this, or maybe this will go this way. Not trying to manipulate things to gear it towards a certain way. It's exciting, it's scary, but I really honestly don't know what tomorrow will bring. And, and I'm trying not to get wrapped up in thinking about that. I'm just trying to just be myself and, enjoy it while it's here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's amazing how far you've taken it and how far things continue to go. And I think that it feels like there's a lot of good things happening and continuing to happen. And I absolutely feel like once this movie gets seen by people, it's going to kind of put everybody right back on that hype train that started those 4 years ago. It's going to remind everybody of the whole story, of seeing that clip for the first time, of seeing the match with you and Candice where Candice was bleeding for the first time. It kind of, for me, all that stuff flooded back, and just the visuals the next day on the internet when all those pictures of Candice bleeding came out for the first time, and it was like, oh my God, this is not just intergender wrestling, but we're changing things here. This is something pretty revolutionary, to tell you the truth. And I think that people are kind of just now in a mainstream way starting to catch up with it. So it's really cool.
Yeah, that match with Candice is on YouTube now, and so I still get tweets about it, and I still get messages about it. So it's kind of cool that it's lasted this long, because that even predates the dick flip stuff. So
yeah.
It's kind of cool that match still is still essentially growing.
Yeah. It's amazing, man. Well, Joey Ryan, thank you so much for making the time today. If you're out there and you hear anything about This Is Wrestling, the documentary about Joey Ryan, then if you can see it, if it's playing at a festival near you, definitely see it. If you can request it wherever you can request it. Whatever you got to do, spread the word about it, because it's really great and you guys are going to love it. And I appreciate it, Joey Ryan. Thanks so much, man.
Oh, thank you.